The idea of segregation stems from patriarchal discomfort. Constructive social norms, behavioral changes, and acceptance have to be taught. She is the creator, she's the destroyer. She's revered as cosmic energy, and she's the one who bleeds. Red is the color of her strength, her enigma, her passion. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you to our show, It Matters. Netizens hailed Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he spoke about sanitary pads in his Independence Day speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort on August 15, 2020. Let's take a listen in on what he had to say.
देशवासियों, गरीब बहन बेटियों की बेहतर स्वास्थ्य की भी चिंता ये सरकार लगातार कर रही है। हमने जन औषधि केंद्र के अंदर 1 रुपये में सैनिटरी पैड पहुंचाने के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा काम किया। 6000 जन औषधि केंद्रों में पिछले कुछ थोड़े से समय में ही करीब 5 करोड़ से ज्यादा सैनिटरी पैड हमारी इन गरीब महिलाओं तक पहुंच चुके हैं। बेटियों में कुपोषण खत्म हो, उनकी शादी की सही आयु क्या हो, इसके लिए हमने कमेटियां बना की रचना की है। उसका रिपोर्ट आते ही बेटियों की शादी की उम्र के बारे में भी उचित फैसले लिए जाएंगे।
So, it's rare to see a Prime Minister talk about menstruation in his national address. Good idea to do it, but the challenge is that you have to even do that. And that's one of our big challenges. In a nation of the size of India, with the history of India, still the Prime Minister has to come and talk about menstruation on a platform where it's the Independence Day of India. Not so long ago, a multinational corporation declared 10 days annual period leave for women. For a long time, corporations have been mudding about the idea. They've been talking about how it's important to have, period leaves, but nobody really acted upon it. Taking the lead from Zomato, it's an organization that delivers food. Other organizations have begun thinking about bringing about significant changes in the policy. There are many questions around it about how many days, leave should be given. There are also discussions about, does every woman need it? And obviously there are, different ideas around some women go through a lot more than the others. But the idea is for us to understand is that this is a real huge challenge. We all, as human beings, come from the uterus. It is time to recognize we must honor the challenges that a woman goes through every month. Vaginal bleeding is normal. Many women have to go through excruciating pain, cramps, anxiety, and other mental challenges because of the hormonal changes. But we constantly hear about what women are put through for periods: embarrassment, awkwardness, discomfort. Many religions even consider them impure during that period. Women have to sometimes walk into stores and the sanitary pads are hidden and given to women. Men feel embarrassed to go pick them up from stores. It's a bit ridiculous. The enduring taboos associated with menstruation continue to endanger the lives of women in so-called modern society. The taboo is clearly hindering our global development. A report from UNICEF revealed that in South Asia, 1 in 3 girls have little or no idea about menstruation before their first period. Most often, they struggle to understand their body changes. Out of the 336 million menstruating women in India, only 121 million women are using sanitary napkins, while others use cloth and even leaves that lead to vaginitis and urinary tract infections. 23 million girls drop out of school annually after their first period. Both the genders must be educated so as to create a circle of comfort. Men should be sensitized about menstruation. I'm going to play out a video uh, that got made around this idea. Let's take a listen into this video.
Dot 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 dot. That's the amount of times a healthy woman gets a period each year. Dot 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 dot. And that's the minimum amount of times a healthy woman is told the biology limits her mentally, physically, and emotionally. You see, since a young age, I was taught menstruation was supposed to be kept in the hidden or whispered. So I'm constantly paranoid, carrying whisper, stay free and more, just so I could stay stress-free, hoping no one whispers behind my red-stained jeans. But you see, I was born into a house of privilege, where my parents taught me that my periods don't limit me. The only thing that could limit me would be my mentality. So on the days I stay in bed because I'm bleeding out of my legs, my brother tells me to go be productive. He tells me there's a world out there I'm yet to conquer. In the 6th grade, Shashwati ma'am gave the sex talk to my class without separating boys or girls. She sensitized boys to puberty and growth, and she introduced us to a whole new world. That year, when I stayed in my uniform, the very same boys handed me their hoodies to wear. They told me it was my Superwoman week. Because if my body's made of stardust and my skin matches land and my body's geology can make continents tremble and mountains move, you aren't allowed to tell me that I should be shy because I paint a town red for a week every month of my life. Because if I've been given the chance to believe that we could live in a world where we could talk about this openly, we could live in a world where we are taught to bleed with pride, in a world where something this common and natural doesn't force us to hide, in a world where we celebrate the only blood that bleeds without violence, in a world where pads aren't rapped and monologues aren't silenced, in a world where you and I can just be as we are, irrespective of our genitals and irrespective of our bodies, then we must.
You know, when you hear something like this, it literally makes your hair stand. That 21st century, we are in that modern era, and women still have to educate people about it. It's really, really sad. But anyways, I'm going to play out a video that we've compiled together of a few women talking about how difficult it is to go through menstruation.
Periods, it's unbearable and it really, really hurts. But it's a blessing in a disguise.
For most part of the country, menstruation still remains a taboo. Though Sabrimala is one way and one example where we have tried to fight this, but of no use.
From their health point of view, because I think that many of the women then can manage it pretty well. It just depends, like sometimes that they have some medical issues, that they're like really facing a lot of pains.
I think, in India, it's not that common to take leave on this issue. So normally people don't take, so that's why we have learned to, bear the pain and just go to office and everything.
Women discriminating themselves over something which is, you get used to it while you're growing up. Obviously, if you're unwell and your cramps are more or something like that, you will take a sick leave.
I personally think it's not that big an issue unless and until you have a very major condition with it. Maybe then it's okay. Like we have PCODs and they go on for like a month or so. So for them it should be like, they should be like given extra compensation for that. But apart from that, I think it should not be an excuse for any leave or anything.
Employees about periods, I've had people who've come up to me saying, I thought periods only lasted for 3 days. How do you have a 4th day? Because that's what they read in textbooks. So, just sensitize them, tell them, and not to crack unnecessary jokes about, is it that time of the month? And, just not irritate people unnecessarily about it. Just like go about doing your work and let us do ours.
Well, so I think it's a topic that really irritates women because they see such a large group of people not understanding what they go through. In fact, many women today make it a point to sensitize men around it because they aren't sensitized enough. I've a very esteemed group of panelists today. Let me start by bringing in Pragya Roy. She's a journalist. She talks a great deal about it. And so she's talking about gender sensitivity today. Pragya, first of all, welcome to the show. Tell me a bit about how large is this challenge? How much education do men need to be provided for this?
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you for having me on behalf of feminism in India. I think first I need to acknowledge the fact that, corporations like Zomato have such power to bring up conversations because all those NGOs, grassroots organizations have been talking about periods and period leaves and everything for so long, but only now or here and then we get to hear only when these corporates take up and institutionalize leaves. So that we need to acknowledge. And like you put very rightly said, that governments need to very, very importantly take menstrual health management up on, say, the law and policy level. And this is because, see, we live in a male dominated world and it's not going to change in a day. So we need to understand that these spaces of privilege are going to occupied by cis het men, and have to take up difficult conversations. They have to actively take up, they have to sensitize themselves first, and not depend on other women to sensitize them. Read up feminist publications, read up on how, or just have conversations with people at your home, as simple as that. So they have to take up those difficult conversations, and probably they have to become better role models for other men too.
I think Pragya, you raise a very important point. It needs to begin at home. The education by the father and the mother, to talking to their boys, and first of all, even talking to their girls about what's going to happen to their bodies and how changes are going to come about, and educating your boys and girls together about how a woman goes through changes and what happens to the woman after. So I think it's a good point. I'm going to come back to you, Pragya. Joining me is Bharati. She's the founder of an organization called Boond. It's an enterprise that makes menstrual cups at affordable prices. Bharati, tell me how much of an uphill task there is at hand when it comes to educating people about menstruation.
It's an incredibly uphill task. It is very multi-layered and multi-sectoral. So, like Pragya was saying, beginning with institutions like home, and entering the foray of workspace, formal as well as informal. There are very few avenues in which there are structural programs that can reach these communities where we can talk about menstruation. At Boon, we're constantly trying to create avenues where we can evangelize, advocate, as well as create awareness on menstrual issues. And the ambit of menstrual issues ranges from not just awareness of the body and the kind of ways people have to manage their periods, but also in the way there's a value chain around which the products are utilized, and they're also thrown and disposed, and particularly very safe and healthy management of those products are also important to be spoken about. And there is very limited scope for that within institutions, let alone in the informal sector. Yeah.
All right. Joining me also is Ananya Choro. She's the founder of Painted Red. It's a social initiative advocating menstrual rights. Ananya, tell me, how important is it to establish these rights, and where as a society you think we've gone wrong?
Thank you so much, Rohit, for having me on your show. And I think it's very important for us to understand how menstrual rights is actually a hindrance to several intersectional human rights. When we think about menstrual rights, we always think about women. We often tend to leave out the non-binary as well as trans people who menstruate. Increasingly, we're also trying to ensure that all the non-conformists are also included into the spectrum of menstrual health and hygiene. When I speak of menstrual rights, I speak of the very basic human dignity that every individual is entitled to, be it gender equality, our right to work, right to sanitation, right to health, right to clean water. All of these are directly related to menstruation. And today, when we're targeting, and as Bharati very rightly pointed out, it is such an intersectional issue. We need to make sure that all of these different categories, sustainable development goals that have been set out by the UN, is achieved so that menstrual rights actually becomes the foundation stone of strengthening human rights in our country.
Thank you, Ananya. Also joining me today is Arjuni Krishnan. He's the director of programs at the Red Cycle. It's a grassroots movement that addresses various issues around menstruation. Arjun, explain to me, is it a challenge working as a man when it comes to menstruation? Or do you think everybody, when you go out talking about menstruation, you're readily accepted? Let's talk about that first, and obviously about, how strongly do you feel men need to be involved with this?
Thank you for having me on behalf of Red Cycle here. Uh, Let me not drag my gender into this, but addressing this issue itself is an uphill task, as Bharti rightly pointed out. Um, we see in the Red Cycle, we see that the demand for safe menstrual products it is an important and tangible menstrual need. We need to acknowledge that. But it has inadvertently eclipsed other equally significant but intangible menstrual needs. And one such need is scientific information. And when we talk about scientific information, it is not accessible to any students for that matter. We have seen educational institutions which restrict any conversation on menstruation, terming it a controversial subject. We have seen the same institutions claiming to have done a revolutionary act installing sanitary napkin vending machines and incinerators. There have been instances where male trainers on menstrual health have been sent back. School authorities have told us many times that boys and students in the commerce section needn't be included in menstrual awareness class. And we see that our menstruating girls are forcefully fed with anti-period tablets for cultural reasons. Our students have less or no access to lessons on menstrual health from schools before or during the onset of menarche. Boys tend to draw wrong equivalence on menstruation to their sexual or other biological functions due to absence of conversation. Now we see that there are a series of issues associated with menstruation wherein the Constitution of India actually encourages citizens to have sense of scientific temper, humanism, and spirit of inquiry and reform. But how do you expect the people to develop these constitutional values with less or no scientific information is the major question here. We have seen a few groups which unapologetically propagate and justify misinformation by linking menstruation to their faith and culture. By simply putting scientific before every single argument, the word scientific is not a mere adjective that can be added to any conjecture inspired by belief system based on pseudoscience. So I think the menstrual health movement in India should build a strong wall of resistance as a narrative against those narratives running against public policy.
Well, very important point there, Arjun. And the reality is that I think it just gets dragged in, educating men, women across, making sure that all of them are capable of teaching what menstruation is part of the whole schematics. One has to get past that idea of that this is man's world and this is a woman's world, and they can intercross in some ways. Also joining me is Pallavi Parikh. She's the founder at UN Gender. It's a niche advisory firm guiding workplaces to become inclusive for all kinds of diversities. Pallavi, explain to me menstruation. How difficult is it to explain to sometimes to organizations how important it is?
Thank you, Rohit, for having me here on behalf of Ungender. It's to answer your question outright. It's not just for some organizations; it's for majority of the organizations, right? And the answer to it, can be directly linked to the kind of education all of us are a product of, and the society, the taboos, superstitions, everything. We are talking about workplaces where people have already gone through a phase of conditioning, a deep conditioning, and this is what they primarily believe in. And at workplaces, when you speak the whole phrase of menstruation leave or period leave, right, the only thing that people actually understand is the word leave, because periods and menstruation are these two words which nobody actually ever spoke to them about in a very transparent and in an open manner. And these are also the words, because of their stigmas that are associated, that not just the ears but the mind also is close to this whole topic. And that's exactly why we see that there is a lot of debate going on whether we should actually allow women to go on leave because of what, just because they are having their periods, because the only understanding of periods is there for people both men and women, right? Even for women, I would say that all of us, because we have very different experiences, even we openly never spoke to a lot of other women about that, hey, how is it with you, right? So our understanding, even within the women group, only stays limited to most of the time to ourselves only. And then if we extend it to actually men, they have never had these transparent conversations. If they had a sister, they would never have had this conversation at home. If they had a mother, caregiver's role, I don't think a lot of women will step away from doing their, mothering duties or nurturing duties to actually tell the people in the family that, hey, I'm going to take a break because my body needs rest, right? So the concept of rest and why rest is required, what is happening with the body, how extreme it is. These are the conversations that primarily men, women, our Indian families have never had till now. And that's where the main role of companies become very crucial as a change agent, because when they speak, when these leaders speak, when they say that we will be doing something like this, suddenly everyone is ready to listen, sit and listen, even if it's forced. We're still having all this conversation because one company decided to actually announce it.
Right.
So
Totally.
yeah,
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Pallavi. I think it was a progressive move by the company, and I've been a news manager for many, many years now. And you create an environment in the place you work where men and women are capable of talking, coming and sharing whatever they may be going through. And I think it's an important part of your managerial skills to be able to be open to the idea of listening to people. You may or may not be sensitized just yet about a lot of things, but creating the persona to be for people to be able to come and access you, to trust you, your little personal feelings is part of that leadership that needs to be developed across platforms, multi-gender, multicultural, religion, all of that inclusive. And I know you work on issues just beyond menstruation. You work on other issues as well in terms of getting people together. Let me go back to Pallavi here. Pallavi, uh, uh, explain to me. Sorry, I'm going to go to Pragya. Pragya, explain to me this whole gender sensitization. How far are we into the game? Where do you think we need to first start when it comes down to gender sensitization?
So we need to start with ourselves. We have to begin taking interest with issues that relate to other genders. So, for example, most of the talk about menstruation gets limited to menstruators only, but there are a lot of non-menstruators or people who have, say, irregular menstruation, and they also are very, very affected by whatever happens. So menstruation is not just, say, sanitary pads, or menstruation is not those 5 to 7 days, but it is so much more, and there is so much. There are people who go through mental health issues because of because of not being able to menstruate, because a lot of women are expected to menstruate so that they can carry children, and if they are not able to do that because of PCOS, PCOD, other health issues, then they also go through a lot of taboos, and they have to face those things. So I think it just, you have to broaden the where this space, and start talking about it in your email, as well as you have to continuously engage, say, at your workplace, and with yourself, very, very importantly,
Sure,
because
sure.
once only you will be able to be able to
No.
understand.
I hear your point. The whole idea to be able to, get past your initial challenges with it and then being able to engage with people is an extremely important part of it. One of the big issues with menstruation, especially because of the lack of sanitation, hygiene levels, because a lot of women do not have access to sanitary pads. It's an expensive proposition. It's not cheap for rural India, for a lot of women in India, even living in urban centers. And I think I'm going to go and talk to uh, Bharati. Bharati, explain to me when you came out with these menstrual cups. I hear a lot about them. What has been the adoption rate like? And if at all you've not achieved, which my sense is you may not have achieved even a small percentage of the goal, why hasn't it succeeded so far?
I'm sure you're very right, Rohit. We probably have less than a 1% penetration of, let's say, anything that is a sustainable alternative like a menstrual cup or a cloth pad. Um, when you think of a period, the first thing that comes to your mind is a disposable pad. And why is that? For example, we have the Prime Minister talking on Independence Day about an OXO biodegradable pad available at every Jan Aushadhi center. But it's very unfathomable because we don't know if these pads are available. As of August 2019, there was a report on a newspaper that says there is no access to these Jan Aushadhi pads, like you mentioned, especially in rural areas amongst the low income community members to be able to access it. Secondly, the uphill task to take a product like a menstrual cup to various communities is a lot of evangelization, a lot of body positivity, a lot of learning and unlearning of things that we've been told. As simple as period blood is impure. So, for example, a menstrual cup necessitates a person to, come in contact with their menstrual blood a little bit. And the imagination or the kind of cultural taboos that have been passed on, like how Arjun mentioned, in terms of religion, in terms of faith, in terms of very unscientific temperament being propagated around menstruation, we certainly know that there's a lot of issues surrounding adopting any sustainable product because it is more intimate contact with the body itself. And in contrast, we're in a phase where COVID is happening and lockdown is there. In fact, sustainable products are far more useful at a point like this, especially when there is no access to pads, including something as simple as cloth that can be upcycled and recycled back at home as long as it's used cleanly and well enough and sun dried and so on and so forth. And even during the lockdown, from whatever we can see, Jan Aushadhi, for example, the pads, the Suvidha pads were listed on Amazon, but there was no stock on Amazon itself. So I just want to wrap with that.
No, no, absolutely. And this is one of the challenges of India, really. There's a lot of things that are talked on from ramparts, even of the Red Fort, and in our, in our law, in our legal system, and we talk about it. But when it comes down to reality, it's unavailable. It just doesn't exist. So, talking about something more sustainable possibly would have been a great idea for the Prime Minister beyond the menstrual pads, because this is an alternate which a lot of women can handle and deal with, and it's not such a big huge cost. And if they were to make these available, and they were to train women with, because of all the small centers that exist to train, it possibly would have been a great idea. But anyways, maybe next year the Indian Prime Minister will talk about these menstrual cups. Ananya, explain to me this whole concept of impurity, if you can, in terms of, I know you focus on reducing period poverty, but if I may drag you out in a separate direction, how is this connected with impurity and in multiple religions, not just one religion? There are multiple religions who keep women out.
Rohit, I think understanding and bridging period poverty is deeply actually entrenched with understanding how the cultural socialization in our country has made periods. In the very beginning, we did not have a great understanding of how a female body functioned. I think that's where the problem initially started. We did not understand how blood was coming out of a female's body without a cause, without being hurt. This mystery that was created around the body then became a propagation of it being unsanitary. So that correlation has affected lives across the spectrum, be it urban or rural. Even today, when I'm not allowed to enter the kitchen on my periods, and every month I fight with my mother to be let in, or when I'm on field and I am at a sarpanch's house, he does not let me use his washroom and asks me to use a hut at the corner of the village. You know that this is something that transcends boundaries. We have not been able to realize that it's the same blood that actually nurtures the child that we have been given the gift to birth. And it is how then can something of that sort be impure?
Wow, yeah, no, it's a reality, and I've heard this many times over. Going to a temple, and your family tells you, it's the days I can't go into temple because I'm impure, and these are days I'm not allowed inside a temple. And I look at it and say, like, you're probably more pious than I am in terms of praying and all of that. I may not even be such a staunch follower, but when I see things like that being said, I know it's been entrenched in your system, in your brain, right from when you're a child, that when you go through menstruation, you're impure and you should not be near God. And, this is the time, while this is what actually creates that opportunity to have a baby, right? You go through your menstruation cycle, you reach your ovulation, and that's when you're ready to have a baby. And you're not going to be having 20 babies in your life, or 30, 40, 100 babies in your life. You're going to only have 2 or 3 babies most of the time. So I think it's just the lack of understanding which makes a society look at it in such a backward manner. Arjun, give me a sense of, what has it taken for you, to kind of bring this kind of awareness to schools in Kerala? You work specifically in Kerala, do you?
Right. Um, Honestly speaking, like I started Red Cycle when I was 18. And since then, since 2015, it's been a learning process, not just a learning process, but it has been an unlearning process too. Like even I've been through that social conditioning where I've been conditioned in such a way that I was conditioned to believe that menstruation is all about sanitary napkins or access to sanitary napkins. But the stories that we hear from people or the experiences of students in our schools have made us rethink and have made us to rethink about how our intervention should be. Also, while talking about other perspectives, like be it the socioeconomic or political dimension to menstruation, let's talk about the workers in Bid in Maharashtra, where the workers have underwent hysterectomies because menstruation was never their priority, because they were penalized for menstruating, uh, for taking uh, for for um, for missing their work days due to periods. And also, we have seen how the recent labor law amendments, uh, which were the constitutional safeguards available to our workers in the factories, are being snatched away. How these safeguards are snatched away, and all these are creating a hostile situation for menstruators, because product alone won't solve the problem. So we have to accept this fact that menstruation is not all about these products, and promises of distribution of products will not solve anything as
Right.
long as there are communities in India who has less or no access to water and sanitation. And also the working women in both the organized and unorganized sector, they don't have access to their labor rights. So how do you actually promise to give them what is rightfully theirs,
Sure.
is the question.
Sure. No, but great point, Arjun. But I'm really tempted to ask you. At 18, how did you come up with something like this? Honestly, at 18, I didn't know what was going on in this world.
In 2015, there were a couple of campaigns that happened in Delhi University and Jamia Millia University called "Come and See the Blood on My Skirt," and even in Jadavpur University, which was called "Stop Sexism." Period campaign. The students of these universities stepped out and they initiated these campaigns to start a conversation on menstruation. Those movements actually inspired a few students in Kerala, and I was uh, one among them. But unfortunately, the campaigners in Delhi or in Delhi University or Jamia or Jadavpur, and later in 2016 there was Nikita Azad's Happy to Bleed campaign. All these campaigners have received death threats, rape threats, and one among them is in jail now, on UAPA charges on a different case. So anyone who stands up for their right have been silenced in this country. And menstruation was one such issue where whenever people show courage to speak up, they have been silenced. And yeah, so we have seen
Very,
this since 2015. So
very,
these
very sad.
experiences have kept us moving.
Very sad to hear that, but at the same time, I think people will continue, raising their voice. Pallavi, I know we don't have too much time, but I'll bring you in to, kind of put a closure to what you're discussing at Ungender and explain to us what do you think are going to be required as legal provisions going forward as we look at menstruation and rights of women.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, what we need to understand is that the existing laws which exist, which Arjun was also mentioning, right, under labor law provisions, they themselves have to be enforced further, especially keeping in mind, and these are laws which have existed for like what, 30,
Right.
40 years already, which already take care into consideration, especially for unorganized sector, factories, construction sites, mining, and so on and so forth. Right. So enforcing the existing laws is first and foremost priority. Second one is to make sure that companies understand that they don't have to wait for every law to come into picture, because making laws is also a very long journey. And
Right.
to be very honest, as an economy, can we really afford to wait for that whole cycle, wherein you are going to discriminate and penalize and not have access to half of the population, which is a desired talent, which is a capable talent. For what? What is the price that you are paying in return? Is this 1, 2, or 3 days, depending on what that particular menstruator is actually going through? And companies have to think a little long term, to be able to plan their costings and to be able to understand that what exactly they're gaining in return in exchange of this understanding. Right? I don't even think, Rohit, that every woman or every menstruator out there is sitting, is waiting to sit and take this paid leave because a company is giving it. The fundamental aspect of
Yeah.
trust and belief that women do enjoy working, women do want to build a career, women do not just want to sit at home because somebody is paying for their that particular day, and they do
With you.
not want to work. All these things have to actually be eradicated from the mindset. There's a very deep level of mindset shift required. As much as we have work in the legal space, I also know that having a laws will not affect the mindset. It can force somebody to have that conversation and put some policies and processes in place. But at a very deeper level, we have to have this mindset shift. I think as an economy,
Yeah.
it's been so long that
With
we
you.
have been looking at, yeah,
With you.
women from
I'm with you. I'm with you, Pallavi.
perspective.
I'm with you on this because, I've had many women come up to me at my workplace and said, I'm really, really suffering today, but I know I have
Yeah.
to finish the show. I have to finish writing this. And as soon as I finish writing, I'm going to exit. But I said, don't worry about it. Somebody else will do it for you. But they're, that sense of doing the work in spite of being in pain, in spite of suffering, is so important for them. So it's not as if they're looking for an excuse. I'm sure it's not the case with everybody. I'm sure there are idiots in all genders and across the world. But there are most people, like, I've come across a lot of them who consider that, taking this leave is not so important for me. They're allowed to go home, they're not well or whatever, but they want to finish the task. So absolutely. Let me bring in a little closing statement because we have very little time left on us. um, Ananya, can you please kind of have your closing statement in terms of where do you think we need to first see are steps being taken, and what do you think, where is the largest change you want to see?
I think I concur with most of our speakers that a lot of our change begins with us. The first step is accountability. So let's start holding all our leaders accountable and get them to promise us a period policy, be it in terms of them distributing sanitary napkins, be it creating disposal facilities or sanitation facilities for women. Let's make sure that when we're exercising our vote, we're doing it with keeping it in mind that menstrual health is a policy that is required and is a mandate that every government should be following. And today at Painted Red also, this is what we're trying to do. We're going to be holding our governments responsible. A speech from the Red Fort is not enough. When only 0.11% of menstruating women have been reached, a simple math will show you that 5 crore sanitary pads being given out is barely a number that reaches the real audience, the ones who actually need it. So yes, you might have created a landmark by talking about it from Red Fort, but can we see the implementation, and can we please vote and exercise our vote keeping that in mind?
Sure. Thank you, Ananya. Bharti, closing statements from you.
I have two statements to make. The first is, since period leave is so topical, I think somewhere amiss in this conversation is that the menstrual labor is very, very connected to reproductive labor. And, in some way, we need to subsume menstrual leave and menstrual policies under reproductive labor, and irrespective of, the gender in which somebody identifies themselves with. The second aspect I'd like to talk about is, like we're asking a lot of, like Ananya was saying, we need to ask our leaders to be more accountable and show the way in terms of implementing policies and programs. We also need to have the media report more sensitively and more responsibly around menstruation. At Bund, we're currently running a campaign called the Periods in Patrikar campaign, where we invite journalists to and various other stakeholders to talk about their challenges on reporting evidence-based, inclusive, and completely data-driven policies on menstruation. So please do look that up as well.
Great. No, absolutely. I have been following that. I saw a video that you guys had done about it. Pragya, can you give your closing statements?
Yeah, sure. So I working in a digital media platform. I understand the limitations that we also have with respect to how much can we reach and who can we reach. And I feel that we try our best to reach those people who have that kind of access to digital media and know how to navigate through those spaces. And we expect that these people who have received our content will be able to disseminate it to other people who don't have that sort of an access. And like Bharti and Ananya pointed out, that law and implementation both have like a gap, and usually there are, say, laws are in place but not monitored carefully, or not seen how much can they reach or not reach. So better implementation of laws and institutionalizing them and taking more accountability for sure. Yeah.
So, the reality is that we are far from reaching the point where we will be able to, educate our population enough. We have a long, long journey in front of us. We will have to make efforts right from our homes to our schools, to our offices, to government offices. I think probably they're probably the ones who'll get it in the end. But we will have to take baby steps, and we'll have to fix it, because there isn't a way around it. You cannot call yourself a modern country if you don't know how to treat your women well. And if you don't know how to treat your women well, not recognize that this is the cycle that actually gives birth to children, and you very well exist because of this. Thank you very much for joining me for the show, all of you. I think it's such an important thing. I don't know why it is not part of our core educational structure. And we all have families. We have you have your parents, you have your sisters, you have your spouses, and your larger world, and we still are not sensitized enough. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for raising the voice, and stay safe out there. Good night and good luck.